Good afternoon or morning or evening, wherever you are in the world right now. Thank you for coming back to Veterans in Conversation. This is season two, episode three. We're very glad that folks are here today. And for those of you that were unable to make it live, we trust that you'll enjoy this episode once you have a chance to see the recording, hopefully with a cup of coffee or maybe an ice cold beer, whatever floats your boat there. So today we have Robert Kilsby with us. This is part two for him. He was here back in August of 25. So we are very thrilled to have him back for kind of a part two. And then we're going to talk about his book that he's recently released. The name of the book is Ultimate Freedom: The Five Fundamental Principles to Being in Charge of Yourself. Now, if that's not a great title, I don't know what is, because being in charge of yourself kind of sets you up for success in life, and the many things that are thrown at you in life. Really doesn't matter what you do as a person, right? We all have challenges, and there's ways that we can figure out how to make sure that we're on top of our game, not only for us, but for the people that are in our lives as well. So, Robert, I want to welcome you back, and then I want to quickly read the about the author part on the front of your book as an introduction, and then we'll just jump right into the interview. But welcome back, Robert. Already. Okay, here we go. Robert Kilsby knows what it means to perform under extreme pressure. As a former Australian Special Operations soldier with the elite SAS, including active service in Vietnam, he learned the true meaning of resilience, adaptability, and leadership when lives were on the line. After 22 years, mostly in the Special Operations military, he carried those same qualities into the corporate world, where he spent a decade as a crisis and emergency specialist, guiding organizations through high-stakes challenges. Today, Robert shares this rare blend of battlefield grit and boardroom insight to help people take charge of themselves and thrive in high-pressure situations. He is the author of The Ultimate Freedom: The Five Fundamental Principles of Being in Charge of Yourself, a powerful framework for resilience and self-leadership. A compelling keynote speaker, he has inspired audiences ranging from corporate teams to community groups and students with his signature message, "Be in charge of yourself." Robert's presentations, including Ultimate Freedom, Be in Charge of Yourself, Leadership Under Pressure, It's Always Too Soon to Quit, I love that one, and Fear and How to Use It, cut through theory and deliver practical real-world tools for stronger choice, resilience, and leadership. Whether speaking to emerging leaders or seasoned professionals, Robert equips audiences with the mindset and strategies to set up, stay strong, and carry through to success when it matters most. So again, welcome, Robert. That's an outstanding piece of work you got there, just in the very beginning of your book. So for those that haven't dug into it yet, I've read the first 8 chapters. I still have to get through chapter 12, but we'll get into that here with Barry. Barry is our resident co-host. he's he's the guy that actually has all the smart stuff when it comes to analyzing. I'm just the guy that opens the door so Barry can, get everyone psyched with his insights. So Barry, welcome, brother. Good to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for the praise, Scott. But remember that the Rhodesians lost the war, so we may be a bit shortchanged on that one, my friend. So, but yeah, good to be here today.
Yeah, well,
And
absolutely.
Rob, good to have you for a deep dive into your book.
Yeah, that's
Well,
great,
there's a bit.
Scott. Very great to be here.
Rob, I'm going to start off with one or two things from your book. You state that what if the key to peace, strength, and purpose lies not in controlling the world around you, but in mastering the world within you. And when you say that, you really detail the core components of any level, any transitioning process. You also note that the military taught you this: you don't have to be born into greatness. You just have to be willing to step up when the opportunity or the adversity finds you. Within that are really key components, not just for veterans and first responders transitioning, but really for any human being in the transitioning process. So I'd like to start off with kind of a quick dive because we want to dive more into your fundamental principles than your backstory. But I'd like to divide it into a quick weave through the foundations, which were your beginnings, then your first battlefield, which you call the forge of service. And I really like the use of the term forge. It would be good to explore that. Then the second battlefield, which you call the crucible, and the third battlefield, which you call the Renaissance. And just to spend a little bit of time on the facts of that process in your own journey, but also to look at how you came to the concepts of the forge, the crucible, and the new Renaissance. If we can start there, and then from there we'll move on to the principles. Does that work for you?
Yeah, no, that sounds a good track, Barry. Yep.
Okay, go for it, mate.
Well, I sort of apologize. I'm not too good at apologizing for anything really, but I sort of apologize for calling it a battlefield. It's just a warrior by heart. I tend to think in these terms, but the first battlefield took me up to the end of my military career, basically from right through. I think battlefield is a good term actually, apart from the military connotation, because it's a battlefield is very much a two-way rifle range. It's things you can do yourself and the things that are happening to you from other people and so on. So it's attributable to boardrooms and family kitchen table conferences to entertainment, to everything. So battlefield's a good start point, I think. And I certainly I was in a battlefield at early times. I had a pretty good upbringing. I sort of raised. I think most of the folks on the call here will understand the old Huckleberry Finn sort of background. Country kid, lived in the desert, on the coast, on the rivers, and so on. Brought up to be independent and to have a crack, as we call it in Australia. Have a go, which is a fantastic sort of bedrock for growing up. It means that you fall off your bike, you got to get up, dust yourself off, and get back on the bike and keep on cracking on. Which is a great lesson in life. I think that if you can hold on to that from a child on through your adulthood, it's very applicable, and leads to success really. So as a country kid, had a great upbringing. I must have been a bit of a serious kid in a way, because while the others in the school were having a good time, and I was up the back reading the newspaper about the Battle of Khe Sanh in Vietnam, and, thinking this war's going to finish soon. I think I better get there before it finishes. After playing cowboys and Indians with my three brothers in the backyard for a long time, it was sort of being in the Boy Scouts and all that sort of outdoor stuff. It was a good area for me to go towards, and as a result of that, I joined the Army, the Australian Army, the day after Armstrong landed on the moon, which is a good thing for me to remember when I joined the Army. It gives me a good date to hang on.
Hey, Robert, I want to real quick. I know I'm hopping in on you. I apologize, but as you're getting ready to transition to going into service, I want to acknowledge the fact and talk to the fact that you spoke so kindly of your parents in this section of the book about how they raised you and the life that you had with them. I thought that was a super thing to do. You also talked about your family and how strong the bonds were between you and your siblings, and the fact that you got to test whether you were afraid of the dark. That part of the story, it just made me think of being a kid, and that was good. I'm very happy that you did that, because folks need to hear stuff like that.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. It's interesting the little story, the little vignette I tell about when I was 12, going bushwalking by myself to challenge my perception that I was afraid of the dark up in the ranges there. Is a story that everyone loves. That one, and in fact, people, modern parents think, crikey, oh, I don't think I'd let my kid go off and wander off and do that, these days. So it was a accolade really for my parents who allowed me to do that. Obviously with a safety overwatch, I'm sure there, but I'd had a bit of experience walking around the weeds in the bush before that as a kid, and so they felt I was independent enough to be able to handle that. And so it's interesting. It's probably the best love story in the whole book. From what most people have told me, they think it's quite interesting as a kid wandering off. But the thing is, it's a lesson. It's a lesson really in terms of how to. One of my keynote topics is fear and how to use it, which I think is interesting for a lot of people. And so that story is really about the start of that in my life. Along the start point. So it's a good lesson in life to how to address fear, and which holds most people back in some shape or form somewhere along the way. The most prominent, the most profound saying I've ever heard is, what would you do with your life if you weren't afraid of anything? And man, that brings up some thoughts, right? So obviously we're not in that boat. So you've got to address these things. So as far as I appreciate your comments on my family and so on. There's a lot of people who weren't as fortunate as me and have had a rough upbringing, and in fact, most of those people were made by that, in a sense. And in spite of that, they were able to conquer through those difficulties, which is fantastic. I was fortunate on the other side to get in my view, a good launching pad, a good springboard into life. And as a result, I was always I'm born on Boxing Day, 26th of December. So I was always the youngest in my cohort right through my life. And actually, compared to some other kids that I knew, that was actually a great benefit for me, because I was able to play with the big guys right from the start. And if you want to be a better tennis player, you want to go and play with people who beat you all the time. You can learn from that. If you don't play with the people you beat all the time, you don't learn much. So this was a great thing. And as a result, when I joined the Army, I joined the Army pretty much straight from school to make sure I got to Vietnam before it finished, some crazy teenage idea. I was the youngest in my, in my platoon, pretty much, in basic training, and then certainly when I went into infantry training, to do the 3 months infantry training course, I was the youngest in that platoon. But because I was deadly serious, and while other people are out drinking on the weekends, I used to put myself through the obstacle course by myself 6 times a day. So I was actually selected, even though I was the youngest in the platoon, as one of the 3, if you like, call them student section commanders, who were, collaborating with running a platoon admin and so on. So that was interesting. And then I was picked up and selected for SAS to go over and do the selection course. And it's probably interesting in a sense. So I was very young then. In fact, they mentioned this at the selection board. They said, well, you're pretty young. And I said, well, yeah, I'm pretty young. And, so send me away to a battalion and I'll get some experience and I'll be back. I'm not going to go away, and I was very surprised. They said, all right, you can jump on the train and away you go. So there were 73 of us started the course, so the selection course, which in those days was about 5 weeks long, and is still regarded as one of the more difficult courses in the special operations world to be selected for that unit, the SAS regiment in Australia. And 73 people started. About, I think from memory, vague memory, about 12 of us finished, and only 5 of us passed, which is, I think, a 95% failure rate or something like that. So it's hard to get into that sort of a place, and it's hard to stay there. Indeed, that's when the hard work starts after you get there. so I was the youngest guy in the regiment, actually, for a short while. Certainly the youngest fighter there. And when we went to Vietnam in 2 Squadron in 71, I was the youngest guy in the squadron. So I had usually in base camp, I had a pretty problematical relationship with my troop sergeant in F Troop, which is some of you might remember the old F Troop on US TV. I was in F Troop too. So there was a bit of a generation gap between me and Frank, the troop sergeant. So I didn't like coming back to base. So I liked the operations, to get out there and get away from Frank, rather than work behind the enemy lines was a lot more comfortable. So I had a pretty good time there. I loved operations. In fact, when my son, who was an extremely good infantry soldier, he did 3 tours of East Timor later in the piece in the 99-2000 area, and he wrote on his first tour. He wrote back a postcard to us with only a few words on it. He said, "Dad, I love operations," and I said, "Yes, operations, we love it." So and of course the training you get is very various and strenuous, and everyone's cross-trained. You can do a lot of things, and in the military, my main specialty became unconventional warfare, which in US terms is what the Green Berets have been doing. The American Special Forces there. So I was at more or less the start of that process in the Australian Army. The first time since World War II. So that was my specialty, and then I got involved with various things, like I was with counterterrorism for quite a while, and I was quite a specialist in a specialist area many times, and also I was involved with intelligence later on. I'm a sort of a linguist, of a number of languages and so on. Lived in Hong Kong for a couple of years, seconded to the British government and so on. So that's why I like to call it the forge. All of these things in me were forged, in a sense, by a very various and great career. It's interesting. This has got a little bit to do with transition, which a lot of people have trouble with. Going from one sort of vocation, let's call it that, into another one, and certainly people from the military and first responders indeed have troubles with this when they've been a long time in the fairly frenetic area, and then they have to change into the mad, chaotic, dog-eat-dog world of the civilian life. The transition. When I was in the military, I must say I treated the military like a resource for me, and I understood completely that I was a resource for them. So they were able to use me well, and I was able to use the Army service well, and we got along famously. It was terrific. And indeed, people said, "Oh, I was a good soldier. I went here and there, and I did what I was told, and I went here and there." And I said, "Well, I had a great career. I worked out where I wanted to go, and then got the Army to send me there." So that's pretty much, it's being in charge of yourself, basically. So this book, Being in Charge of Yourself, didn't happen just recently. This has been going on for most of my life. Indeed, I put the principles for it together later on when I was doing 2,450 kilometres down the Murray River in a sea kayak when I was 70. A lot of thinking time as you're paddling, 10,000 strokes or whatever it is. But I've been living those principles for a long, long time, ever since really I was a teenager, without realising it in some ways. So so the forge of my first battlefield was a good one. It still had its ups and downs, valleys and ridges. A lot of injuries. I still live with pain, pretty constantly through the last few decades. But I don't mind that. I just call it entertainment and get on with it. It sort of works for me. So the second battlefield was going into after the military, and I'd already worked out what I wanted to do there. So the transition for me, unlike most people seem to find, was pretty smooth for me, because I was in charge of myself and I knew what I wanted to do, and it still had the same problems you got to solve and all of those things. But that's why I call the book Ultimate Freedom. If you're in charge of yourself, really, that's your ultimate freedom. There's nothing better than understanding that. And I'll talk more about the book obviously when we get into it. But in the second battlefield, I did a lot of things, and a lot of crisis and emergency management practicing and consulting to some of the biggest companies in the world, actually, their business teams, both here in Australia and overseas. And also, I did a lot of things. I did whatever it took. I did whatever it took to put food on the table. I was a mature age carpenter there for a while, built a lot of places. I was in the quite successful in the investment property area, helping people buy investment property. I even put Colgate toothpaste tubes in packets in a factory there for a while. Your family's got to eat, right? So I didn't have any problem with whatever I had to do. It's just another mission to me, and get on with it. But most of the time I was, working for myself and doing the hard yards of that. So that's the crucible, in the fire, putting things together, some of which I'd obviously picked up in my life before, So along the way, then I got involved with motorsport. In fact, I got to say that motorsport saved me, in the PTSD area, or what Barry calls PTS, area. You give the dysfunction bit on the end of kicking the touch there. So that finding motorsport actually saved me, really, because I was going out the door backwards there after the missions were unraveling, and the crisis emergency management work was coming to an end, and so on. I found that the flame started to flicker again when I saw that these guys who were restoring old cars and that, they were actually racing these cars, and I thought, oh, that's something I can do as I'm going out the back door. And I got involved with that, and that really picked me up and pushed me in a new direction. And I built a really good program for veterans in Motorsport Australia, where we had veterans in recovery becoming part of our team, to compete in tarmac rally at the national level, and which was fantastic. So the similarities are working in small teams, pursuing excellence. Everyone's got their own back. This sort of stuff that obviously special operations, but also largely in the military you have. So that was a good thing. And then I went through when I got back from the kayak trip. I found that it was a little bit arduous, I thought, but I got back from there, and I was pretty much straight away diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. So I thought, yes, another mission. This is good. So I spent all of 2022 being diagnosed and treated and recovering from that. And then in 2024, I had double open heart surgeries, the triple bypass there. I had to have two because I broke the plates in my chest, or whatever they bolted me down with initially. I'm not sure how I did that, but it's not a bad trick if you can do it. And they had to open me up again and so on within several days. And then I had a pacemaker, big defibrillator thing put inside me, which when the old ticker starts playing up, apparently it's going to give me 800 volts hammer in the chest. And I thought, well, that's not a good look when you're doing 200 kilometers an hour through a country road with a navigator sitting next to you, a rally car. And so I was easily able to say, well, I've got to retire as a rally driver now. Bang. Now what's the third battlefield? So that's the transition in the third. And I thought, well, even if they wheel me onto a stage in a wheelchair, I can still be a good keynote speaker at 80 if I've got a message. So I'm in the last frontier of the brain these days, and I'm fairly fit, but I'm the battle of the mind is the third battlefield, which is and I say flippantly to people, I'm trying to stay alive long enough so technology will save me, basically. So that's the third battlefield, and I was able to write this book, Ultimate Freedom, in to basically give me, if you like, intellectual property as a credibility for my message, to be in charge of yourself. I thought I needed something in writing, because I'd always resisted writing a book about my memoirs and, this is what I did. Because I always thought, well, I was just doing my job and things like that. I never thought that would be too interesting for other people. Even though everyone enticed me to say, come on, you've got to write a book. You've had an interesting life. So finally, I did write a book, and I wrote the manuscript in 2 months for that book. And it just flowed out of me. I didn't use any particular tools other than Grammarly, on the computer. And my second book, which I've just finished the manuscript of, which is a big jump up into the top level of leadership after the foundation first level of leadership of Ultimate Freedom. I actually gave myself 3 months because I thought that'd be a much more difficult book, which it is. And I was falling behind because there's a few peripheries that I had to do for it. 3 weeks behind schedule, and I thought, crikey, this is no good. So I ramped it up, and I ended up finishing 3 weeks ahead of schedule. So I wrote a book twice as big and much more complex in 2 months and 1 week for that manuscript. So it's a crazy world out there. You've got to be in it to win it.
Yeah, Rob, I want to say that, I mean, you define, we talk a lot, and I talk a lot about there's no change without fire. But I have a feeling that fire is quite fearful of you. I mean, you just have this capacity to forge whatever you need to create a vision. I don't think you really made it clear, but when he talked about going on a canoe trip, I don't know if he told you it wasn't like 10 kilometers. It was literally 2,450 kilometers down the Murray River while he was experiencing cancer. So I don't know, there's hope for, when I think that I'm kind of 73 and he's got a few years on me, I feel very hopeful. So Rob,
the 2,450 kilometers is sort of like starting out in Adelaide and paddling towards Darwin and nearly getting there. It's like paddling a kayak, one blade after another, all the way to Darwin, just short of Darwin.
So Rob, thanks for that journey through the life where you forged the crucible up to your new renaissance. I think this is a good time to really start to look at your choices, your fundamental principles. And the first principle you talk about is choice. And I love your comment where you say to choose is to be free and to act on the choices to grow. That really encapsulates the challenge we all face, even chronologically. I always talk about there's a new crucible, there's a new fire in our 70s onwards where we do have to face, but sometimes we forget we still have the capacity to choose and grow. So Rob, if you want to sort of take us through what you mean by choices as a fundamental principle, and your first one as well.
Yeah, thanks, Barry, for those words. Probably the good way at the end of each principle, the chapters there in the book, I've actually done a summary, so people can use it as a bit of a toolbox and they can go back. And so I've put a summary down at each choice, and so it might be useful for that if I can read out that short summary for the guests on the podcast here, to give that there, and perhaps you can ask me a couple of questions off that. That might be the way to go. I will say as an overview, these principles, 95% plus of people that I talk to, and I say, and they ask me, what am I doing? And I say, well, I'm in the business of helping people, be in charge of themselves, be the pilot of their plane rather than the passenger in their plane, sort of thing. They say, wow, most people say, wow, I'd like some more of that. And it's something obviously that is pretty hard to get from most people, and most people take decades in their life to finally get there. I've had the fortune to get there early in my life and be able to talk about it to people. But the thing about they're all simple, these principles, and so you could be forgiven for saying, well, I know about that, I know. But it's very hard to do that, and you've got to look at it holistically. So it's not a single file track we're working on now, but the first principle is choices. And the summary reads as such. So choices lie at the core of human freedom. Whether reactive or proactive, conscious or unconscious, every step we take is governed by the choices we make or fail to make. The belief that we didn't have a choice is one of the great myths of modern life. In truth, from the seemingly insignificant decisions we make daily to the life-defining ones, we are always choosing. Even doing nothing is a choice, often made quietly and without awareness. Remember, your choices, however small, will always send those ripple waves outwards as well as back to you. And I use that analogy of throwing a rock into a pond, and the ripples go right out to the bank, but then they come back as well. And they go right out to the pond. They don't stop a couple of feet away. So whatever you choose has consequences. So to take charge of yourself, you must first accept and understand that your life is a product of your past choices, and your future depends on the choices you make now, rhetorically. From the origins of your choices to the decisions that turn thought into action, to the outcomes and consequences that ripple through your life and the lives of others. This is the path of self-leadership. To choose is to be free, and to act on that choice is to grow. And then to own the outcomes of that first step towards ultimate freedom. So that's the summary, Barry. And, I couldn't have said it better myself, I think.
Yeah, well put, mate. The question, I think, also anybody think of any questions you may want to put to Robert now. But Rob, the thing I'd ask you is that, I've always said that that claiming of ownership is critical, because, even when I was working in the military area with the guys, or even in my school, I often will hear, I'm not motivated, I'm not interested, it's too hard. And I always go, well, you make a choice as long as you accept the consequences of that choice. With the military, I always used to point out that no matter what happened in your life, you cleaned your weapon. So, those are the basic choices we make every day, or suffer the consequences of an AD or a runaway gun or a stoppage. What allowed you, what was your mindset when you really faced incredible levels of adversity that kept the choice and your freedom to choose, you kept the fire of that alive?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's a good way to look at it, actually, because there's often been said many ways, and as I've talked more about leadership in my second book, people rise. They don't rise to the level of their ambitions. They fall to the level of their preparation or their training. So it's not something that comes along suddenly, and suddenly you jump up and say, I'm fully squared away on this one. It doesn't happen that way. So choices, if you like, to do it properly is the result of muscle memory, in a sense. It's a mind memory, and it's something, if you don't practice it, you'll be found wanting. Pressure reveals the situation. It doesn't create the situation. And that's, I think people would probably sort of understand that inherently with them, even though they can't articulate it. So the fact about suddenly making choices when adversity comes, you're going to be in a very poor, a lesser ability to do that if you haven't already been understanding of, the reason why you're here today is for the choices you made yesterday. So in other words, if you know that, well, that means you can have a better tomorrow, right? For the choices you make today, if you realize that. So it's sort of a simple thing, but it's difficult to attain. You've got to look, you think holistically about this stuff. But I think, this business, a lot of people say, and we've heard it throughout our life, some of us and most of us have probably used it ourselves. We didn't have a choice. Well, you chose not to have a choice. In a sense, you agreed with someone who said, well, the very fact that you stay at home or you play in a team or you don't play in a team or something is not because someone else is controlling you. It's because you agree with them controlling you, if I can put it that way. So choices is a very powerful thing. And I put it first in the principles because really it's the baseline, it's the foundation of these principles. And you just can't escape from it. It's not something that's concocted when you need it or something like that. It's your bedrock. It's your foundation of yourself. Once you realize and understand that, we make thousands of choices every day. Actually, most of them are reactive, like driving in the traffic. Sometimes you can't even remember going from that block to that block, because you're thinking of other things. You think, how did I get here? I can't remember turning all through those corners. All of us have probably seen that in our lives because your body is making reactive choices, drive this way, turn that way, brake now, those sort of things, if I can use that analogy. But the proactive choices are, what am I going to do with that guy at work, one of my staff who's having troubles and, how can I help him? And where am I going to go for the family holiday? And what should I do after this job finishes? They're the proactive choices. They're the harder ones, obviously, which spend more time thinking about. But I think there's a good way to put this. If you're not, if you're not running your own life, someone else is. It's as simple as that. And just something very simple and close to home. You can have a good day or a bad day. You choose. So people ask me and say, oh, do you have any bad days? I said, yeah, I've got bad days, but they're all good for me, because I accept them and I get on with it. I don't have bad days in effect, therefore. Some of the days are harder than others, obviously. You've got more problems to solve and all those sort of things and more consequences and lesser margin for error and so on, But, you can either run your own life or you can have other people run it for you. And the biggest statement on people's deathbeds by far, and it's well documented, is I wish I'd had the courage to live my own life rather than the life that others expected of me. By far, it's the most prevalent statement. So, it's a pretty good track to be on.
Yeah, Rob, and
Can I just give a real life
example?
Thank you. And having read the book, and I bought a copy for everyone in our team. And look, we've all read a lot of leadership books, and many are brilliant. Robert's book got me up off the lounge after reading it, and I made a phone call. And this was from a personal nature, not business. And I'd chosen to allow someone in family to operate in a particular way. And then I made a phone call and very tastefully and respectfully chose to lead that situation as opposed to being led by that situation. So that person probably would have preferred that I didn't read Robert's book. It all worked out in the end, but the situation was solved for both parties, and I started to be in charge of myself in that situation. So, and it was, like I said, having read a lot of leadership books, many of them you do put into practice, but I felt compelled to get up right there and then and make that phone call, and adjust and shift that choice. So I found it unbelievably empowering. It was quite amazing.
Yeah, spot on, Maddie. And I mean, the thing is, it's the most practical book. You know, I've poured through it, read it, highlighted it, and I think the most important thing, Robert, that you've nailed is that from the day we are born till the day we are die, we enter and exit crucibles, forges and crucibles consecutively. Each fire builds layers upon us, and the attitude we bring to that cycle of movement till the time we breathe our last breath defines who we are and how we live with others and in the world. It's just perfect. It's such a practical. And I also want to say, guys, the greatest privilege for me was actually Rob inviting me to do a review on the first page, because to be a part of this book was a real gift. It's an unusual and quite a unique book. Does anybody have any questions to put? Sabine, thanks.
Yes, hi. Yeah, a very impressive thing to think about. And I asked myself, what gives us the ability to make the right choices? And I thought about, in this context, about my own upgrowing. I see it through the lens of transgeneral trauma. And what I want to point out is that in my family, when I was a child, there was such a lot of silence about very, very important things. And this kind of silence was rooted in shame and guilt because of grandfather's participation in a big war crime. And thus aroused a lot of insecurity in very, very important things inside my parents. And so my parents were in many situations very insecure, and they could not give me security about my emotional life and my emotional decisions. And that leads to insecurity inside myself. And I think this is very profound. This is what I found out in the last years with the help of therapists and facing history and such things. And when I understand you right, Robert, that is what Scott said, you were raised by very emotional, mature parents. And I think these parents allowed you to feel safe inside yourself. And this allows you to, when you have a feeling of safety inside yourself, and your parents support this feeling, you were able to make good decisions. And this is what I experience in my life, that I didn't have that security for a very, very long time. And I had to give this security to myself later on in my adult life. And here come with the biggest decision I made in my life. I had a situation in my life where I felt this very, very deep, and I had to make the decision to stay depressed and sad and angry, or to begin the journey. And I think this is a very important fact in my life. I had also a choice, and I suppose I did choose, I made the right decision. But it was a very hard struggle to do that, I must admit. Yeah, this is what I want to add. Right.
Yeah, thanks, Sabine, for that. Really good words. Yeah, I appreciate that. Rob, you know, I often, in working with students, they often come into my room and I go, what's the problem? And they go, oh, I'm just not motivated to work. And my next question is, so help me understand what the problem is. And they go, what do you mean? I go, it's not about motivation. It's about what do you do in the face of discomfort, effort, discipline, time management, organization. And I think when they get that, and I think the thing you point out is we don't just find it. You know, I build in often with students just the cold showers. We have competitions around cold showers. I'm a cold water. I love it. Breath work, daily discipline, make your bed, McRaven's kind of principle. It's doing the moments of daily discipline every single day to build the foundation to take you through the forges and the crucibles to achieve the success you want. Your next one is around ownership. And I think this ownership is the one where so many people struggle. They don't take ownership. And when we don't, we fall back into the victim stance. And as long as we're in that place, there's no choice. Can you talk to your principle too? And we can explore that.
Yeah, Barry, this is ownership is a real big one, and especially for young people too. You know, if you wanted to pick one out for young people, this is probably the first step in a sense. You know, because it's a bit more easily understood in a sense as a start point. The thing about ownership is, you know, Jocko Willink, the great SEAL leader from the Iraq and so on, you know, has written a lot of books and said a lot of things. And one of the things that Jocko says is that a leader has to own his everything. You know, he has to own everything in his world, in a sense. You know, so ownership is principle two. And I say that you need to own your actions and take responsibility for their consequences. You know, so it's an accountability issue, if you wanted to use that word in it. And the summary on the chapter is ownership is the great activator on the path to ultimate freedom, the activator. Where choices begin the journey, ownership brings it to life. It demands that you take full and unrelenting responsibility for your actions, your reactions, and most importantly, your outcomes. It's not about perfection or control over circumstances, but rather about personal power. The ability to say, this is my life and I own every part of it. That means no excuses, no blame, no passing the buck, not even when things are hard, unfair, or messy. Ownership is also the soil, you know, it's the birthplace of true leadership. It's not reserved for those with titles or rank, but for anyone, parent, student, professional, who chooses to be in charge of themselves. Leadership grows out of emotional responsibility, financial and time stewardship, integrity in words and deeds, and learning from mistakes without shame. By owning your time, your beliefs, digital footprint these days, and your boundaries, you can reclaim control over the direction of your life. Without ownership, freedom is an illusion. With it, everything changes. Just on the thing I like to say, you know, in terms of think of the garden of ownership, you know, excuses, if you like, are the weeds in the garden of ownership. A lot of people say, you know, they've got a blame list. Actually, they say, oh, you know, this happened to me. All the bad things that happen. Some people have got a list of who's to blame for all of that. You know, the government's always a good one to attack. You know, bloody government. You know, the neighbour. It could be even a family member. It could be even the weather. You know. But it's interesting that a lot of people with blame lists do not have their own name on the list. It's interesting. Now, you know, when I had a blame list, as I was going through this decades-long journey, when I did have a blame list, I figured out really quickly that I'd just put my own name on it and work down from there if I needed to. So this is very important, and I had a couple of mentors who commended me for that. But you know, I've gone past. I don't have a blame list of anything, you know, and that's the key. So excuses are the weeds in the garden of ownership. I like that one.
And the thing is, Rob, I think the challenge is, of course, that because many of our foundations have cracks in them, we carry we carry those cracks in which grow the weeds of our past into our present and our future. I like the fact that we can acknowledge that at times we've not taken ownership. And as you said, we now have the weeds in our garden of growth. Well, the challenge there, and I think you put it so beautifully, is that our first job then is to go and pick those weeds. That's what we need to do. So, Maddie, when you talked about taking responsibility and actually setting the boundaries and communicating through that, that's picking a weed. And we need to clear that internal ground that we operate in to be able to move forward effectively. I think there's so many beautiful things here, and I don't think we get it. I think we work at it till the day we die. This is not a book for a moment in time. It's a book in your 70s, 80s, and 90s, even on your last breath, on your deathbed, that you would look at and think about. Does anybody have any questions on ownership here? Scott, you're licking your lips. That's normally a sign.
It's good coffee on this end, but no, well, for the part of the discussion we're on now with ownership, I think there's the integrity piece to that is so key, right? Because if you're not a person of integrity and you don't use that for analyzing the whole bit of ownership, you're not going to be true to yourself, right? So the integrity piece, I think, is huge, and it's also a bit of stoicism too. I really like that you quoted Seneca in the book, where he says, to be fit to rule, one had to first rule themselves, right? How many folks have you had the great fortune of being under that didn't do that, and how hard it was when you had to work with them, So yeah, good stuff. And, you had mentioned that these things aren't difficult to understand, but they're absolutely hard to execute in life, depending on, what's happening at any given time. You look at, say religion, the stuff that Jesus talks about, it's very basic, but doing those things is not as easy, right? It's very hard to carry that, especially when you're dealing with folks that maybe you have issues with, trying to lay that down. So yeah, executing on principles isn't always easy, but the way that you lay it out here, it makes you want to look into it, and it makes you want to be better. So yeah, we appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks, Scott.
I thanks for that, Scott. I just wanted to kick back to what we started with when I mentioned the blame list. It's interesting that there's two ways to handle the past. Now, one is to use it as a school to learn from, and the other one is to use it as a club to beat yourself with. And guess what? Most of the people that I've ever met, they use the latter. And a lot of people walk around with a bag of rocks over their back, most of their life, and they think of the past. And I think Socrates said, "Talk to me about the future. That's where I'm going to live." So it's something that we're all afflicted by, because it's the human trait. But the trick is to get rid of that bag of rocks and learn from things that happen. And the fact is, people don't learn from victory; they learn from defeats and learn from their own mistakes and learn from other people's mistakes if they're lucky, and get it done early. So that's some good comments there. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks, guys. What I like about your principle 3 is that principle 3 can't happen unless principles 1 and 2 happen. Probably the clearest example for me personally was in 1990. I'd been running a couple of marathons, and I decided I wanted to do a thing called Comrades Ultra Marathon, which was, I think it was 84.7 k's uphill from the beginning to the end. And I liked the goal. It felt like such an amazing thing, and I had this vision. But what I had to learn along the way was I had to go through a couple of forges and crucibles of training for 6 months, literally hundreds of kilometers a week, till I didn't want to do it. And then in the place of not wanting to do it, I then had to make a choice whether I was going to sit down or get up and keep running. So I like the fact that the goal is not the first one. The goal is the fire of intention, but the fire intention cannot exist unless the very core of the training that lives within us to actualize it and go through the creaks and groans of it becomes apparent. So can you talk to the concept of goals and how that fits in as your third principle?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, if any of sailors amongst us, there's a lot of good sayings from sailors who have to see the adversity of the sea. You know, one of the old Stoic philosophers once said, you know, if you don't know where you want to go, any wind is unfavorable. And you know, any wind is unfavorable. And a paraphrase of that, in a sense, is the wind blows the same for everybody. It's the set of the sails that make the difference. So I like those sailing analogies. And there's a very old African saying, Barry, as well, that good sailors are never made in calm waters.
Perfect.
So I'll read the summary because it's quite an interesting one, especially the first and second sentences in there. I think goals are the navigational architecture of your journey to ultimate freedom. More than just destinations or bucket list dreams, your goals are meant to compel personal transformation, to help you become the kind of person who can achieve them. So it's actually not the outcome of the goal itself. The true outcome is what you have to do to achieve that goal. That's who you become. You have to change something in yourself, like you're training for the ultra marathons and so on, Barry. So I think that's a really, really profound statement that a wise and wealthy man once shared with me. True goal setting isn't a one-size-fits-all task, but a deliberate and layered process of compartmenting and combining life aspirations anchored by clarity, alignment with values, and the patience to stay the course. So it's not just, oh, I want to go there. Using both foundational frameworks like the SMART and the SMART, which everyone probably will have heard of, and my own evolved methodology, we walk readers through creating goals that are scalable, are measurable, and ultimately transformational goals that start from one's life vision and work backwards through strategic, medium-term, and intermediate goals. I teach that aiming high, well above the tree line, if you want to hit the treetops, is not wishful thinking, but a practical necessity in a world full of friction, complexity, and unexpected punches to the face, as Mike Tyson would say. And just as critically, emphasize the truth that in all life's crowded phases, crisis and opportunity are often the same event, depending on how we set, view, and execute our goals. So I think goal setting, a lot of people have trouble with this actually, especially when it comes time to say, well, what is my life's goal? What's the legacy I'd like to leave and things like that. What's my life goal? Because how can I just observe the tactical issues of the immediate goals, if you will, without understanding the strategic goals. So people haven't gone through that thinking. But just to give a potentially humorous way of looking at how do you get your life's goal, you imagine if you're going to your own funeral in the box, and for some strange reason you're lying there. They've got a perspex top on the coffin, and you can see out of it for the time before they put you in the ground. And you're looking up, and they're lowering you into the box, into the hole. And you're looking up, and you're looking at the faces that are peering down into the hole. And you can ask yourself, I wonder who turned up for me, and what do they think of me? and what would I like them to think of me? Therein lies the nemesis, the kernel of your life's goal. So if you can work that out from that, then you can just reverse engineer and then work out your medium goals, your intermediate goals, and your next ones you got to do in the next few weeks. I tried that out on my very good mentor friend, Jim Truscott, and he liked that. So I've always stuck with it. Reverse engineering is a good one for goals. The goal is to get to this appointment on this time. I always reverse engineer that. Okay, so I want to be there 10 minutes early. Then it's going to take me 45 minutes in the traffic. Lead time of 10 minutes, etc. I need to leave by such and such. So reverse engineering, it always works. And you can do it on a life basis as well. So that's the summary for goals, Barry.
Yeah, Robin, I think the important thing you make very clear is that the goal is not the end in mind. The goal is an invitation. It's a point on a map in a future place. And the goal then defines the invitation from where you're at to start to learn to forge and define yourself through the rigors of achieving the outcome to get to where you want to be. I think so often we get caught up in spending a lot of time on our goals, but not realizing that between where we are and our goal, there's a whole lot of territory we got to cross. And when we get stuck on the goal without going into actual getting our feet dirty, we remain with the idea of where we want to be or who we wish to be, but we really haven't moved much. And I think making that apparent, that when you set your goal, that's just the beginning. Now the journey begins, the work begins. And you say that achieving the goal is secondary. And that's a really important thing to tell people. Define a goal, but know that it's secondary. You put it, it's the growth, discipline, and identity you develop along the way that transform your life and empower your freedom. Rob, what's a core example in your own life where you were able to really face this crucible, define your goals, and step into the adversity and the fires of creating change needed to achieve what you wanted to achieve?
If I can use a very human example as opposed to some military thing or whatever, because there's plenty of those in that area, but a personal example, which is, these days is worth looking at, is when I was, when I came back from the kayak trip, and about a month later, and I had some some basic sort of symptoms and so on, and I went to they said, oh, you need to see a specialist. So I went there and they gave me a CT PET scan and all those sort of things, and so I came back to the hematologist, and she was really good, and I said, so what was the result of this PET scan, the CT PET scan? And she said, oh, well, and she had a good sense of humor. She said, you lit up like a Christmas tree. It's all over you. And I said, that, and I got to say, in other words, you got stage 4 cancer, Jack, watch out, And I thought, that's fantastic. I got a new mission, was my reaction, my personal reaction. That's good. Now I've got something real important to do. I got to get through this little mission now. So the way I sort of view this is, so the goal was to get through the mission, see if I can survive this thing. But I knew that I had to adopt a certain attitude about it and certain processes and so on. So the way luckily I had that muscle memory from, being in charge of myself for decades and so on. So I was able to say, right, so what I'm going to do is I'll use all of these specialists. I'll work from the top down. If I can get the best specialist possible, if I can afford it, or they're available or whatever, and if I can get them, that'll be great. If they're not available, I'll go to number 2, and I'll work down from the top, not from the bottom, and not from social media or something, Dr. Google or whatever. And so what I'll do is I'll recruit my medical army, I call them, of all these specialists, as many as I can get and afford and have the time for, and I'll let them do their work so I can get on with my own life. And I'll do exactly what they tell me, because I don't want to go to university for 14 years to learn how to do that stuff. So they're the specialists. Let them do their work so I can get on with mine, which is which is get on with my life and solving my own problems and so on. And it works perfectly. And I would commend it actually to anybody who's beset with any major medical problems and so on, is to have that attitude and, not try to do it yourself, utilize your team around you. And I say this from everyone from CEOs to, in their normal business journeys, get your team on side. And, my second book, I talk about elite leadership, but I also talk about elite teamship as well, which is very important. So that's probably a goal that I set myself, but I allowed myself to understand that other people needed to be driving it in many ways, and I had to do certain things. So if you want things to change, you've got to change something in yourself. There's a lot of people mouth that and give it lip service, but that's the bedrock. That's the gold.
It's hard not to feel inadequate around you, Rob, but I'm working on it. But I think, yep. So your next principle I really like. When I often sit on trains and I look left and right, everybody's got a mobile phone. I think people's situational awareness is probably about 4 inches in front of their face. I've always said to the veterans that they go, well, is it a problem that I scan? And I go, well, PDS, as you said, there's no such thing as a disorder. But that situational awareness, that 360-degree scan, is probably one of the most powerful components as long as it doesn't make your life dysfunctional. I think that awareness of other, awareness of self, awareness of environment, and that I think is such a critical component. You're layering up in a really perfect way. You're building brick by brick by brick on this house called achieving the mission that you want. Can you talk to your thoughts around awareness?
Yeah, I think in a sense this is the biggie, and I've no doubt that one of the reasons why you liked it, Barry, is because you're a psychologist. Just there's a shed full of psychologists in this awareness.
Not my favorite animals, but we'll get back to that one.
So awareness is something that in a nutshell, you've got to be self-aware, you've got to be socially aware, and you've got to be environmentally/situational aware. So self-aware is obviously, know thyself, know yourself. It's easier said than done. And a lot of people have troubles with this through their life. And they find surprises all the time because they're not concentrating on this idea that it's a good idea to know yourself. So they can see a lot of speed humps in that highway. Socially aware is very important because unless you're a guru living under a rock or in a cave for 40 days without bread and water, you need other people. You're always around other people. And in fact, humans, as we know, are like herd animals, so to speak. We need people to do well. And in fact, if we've got good people around us, we do superly well, really good. So try not to be a rock, be a sponge, and take in everything around you. And self-awareness is part of that. Now, socially aware is understanding what's happening to the dynamics of those people around you, and start with, the people closest with you, your family and so on. People at work, in your workplace, people you associate with, it could be in the football team or your social activities. But environmental and situational awareness is very important too, because we live in a governed world, especially in the Western world. But even in a third world, we live in a tribal sense or something like that. And there's certain rules that are there. You're not going to be able to change them, even if you wanted to. Some are good, some are not so good. You've got to understand that your environment, if you want to walk through a minefield, it's a good idea to know where the mines are. You can walk on water as long as you know where the stepping stones are. So that's environmentally and situational awareness. And if you've got all three of these, it's a fantastic power surge for you towards your ultimate freedom. And I'll with that, I'll read out the summary here, which I think encapsulates this. So awareness is the fourth and most inwardly demanding of the 5 fundamental principles in your journey to ultimate freedom, being in charge of yourself. It's the process of understanding yourself clearly, reading this social environment wisely, and navigating the business and external world strategically. In short, it's about becoming awake to your own strengths, your own blind spots, to the dynamics of people around you, and to the shifts and structures and signals in the environment that affect or potentially enhance your freedom of action. True awareness is not passive. It's an active intelligence requiring courage, discipline, and curiosity. As an aside, I think the curiosity quotient you see in people around you will be the measure of their intelligence, actually, their IQ. You find that people who don't care about anything and don't ask too many questions, they're not the sharpest tool in the box, typically, if I can say that in blunt terms. You must investigate your values, monitor your emotions, question your inherited beliefs, and detect and push back on your biases. You must listen actively, speak with clarity, adapt to complexity, and when needed, pivot fast. Awareness doesn't guarantee control, but it does give you the advantage of choice in uncertainty. In this principle, you become the strategist of your life, blending insight with foresight, always alert to what lies on the other side of the hill, as the Duke of Wellington once said.
Yes,
There's a lot in it.
Yeah. So you finally then take us to your final commitment. And, you know, this is principle 5. And this is the one I really enjoy because, you know, when I talk about cold water showers are not a cold water shower in the middle of summer. You need to have an experience where it's a cold water shower, a run, make your bed, but it's the one where you face resistance. Like a run with no resistance. An easy run is nothing. A difficult run is a run. And it's that place between yourself and the shower, yourself and the goal, where the last thing you want to do is do it, but the commitment is to step into it. So that really actualizes and forms that final goal to cross in your book. Can you talk to that, Robin? And maybe an example of your life you've given us huge examples of your commitment to many things, but can you talk to that and take us through it?
Yeah, Barry, yeah, I will. I'm actually the sort of crazy guy who says I'm going to run up that hill or die trying. That's my base point. Commitment is the unshakable force that ties all the other principles together and drives them forward. So this is there's those 4 principles, but this is the one that puts them into action. Without it, even the best choices, the strongest ownership, the clearest goals, and the deepest awareness will falter when life inevitably gets hard, as it always does from time to time. Commitment is the muscle that keeps you upright in the storm. The resolve that keeps your hand on the wheel when motivation fails and wanes, and enthusiasm wanes. And the decision to stand firm and look ahead when it would be far easier to quit. That's commitment. It doesn't arrive by accident. You must bring it. You must bring it, apply it, and renew it again and again. So the journey to ultimate freedom is not a straight line, nor is it a checklist of achievements. It's a lived process full of friction, course corrections, and learning in motion. You think of all the course corrections that the Apollo program had to do to get to the moon in that one final successful flight. It's like that. Commitment is what powers your return to the arena after defeat. what sharpens your vision when the path gets dark, and what ensures your values and action stay aligned through discomfort, delay, and even failure. It's more than follow through. It's identity in action. As our motto says, it's always too soon to quit. Now, the thing is, another soundbite that I like to, that I've created here is ultimate freedom is not a finish line. It's the way you live your life. So we're not talking about a destination or, this is a journey. All of this stuff is a journey. So once people understand that, I find that they can address this in a much more complete way. So as our motto says, it's always too soon to quit.
Rob, I want to thank you, mate. Seriously, your book, when I go through it, it brings awareness to so many things, even in my life now. The victim part of us, the struggle, the lack of commitment, the defeat. These are the aspects of humanity and our humanness that we have to face to become fully who we are. It's a little book, but Scott, that book speaks volumes in the most accessible way. I love your summaries because it's easy to jog memory, and it's a kind of book you'd almost want to meditate on a section at a time at night before you go to sleep, and then have a kind of self-look into yourself and your journey. And I really want to thank you for that. It's seriously good wisdom born out of the fires of your own life. And I know that I'm certainly, and I'm sure Scott would be looking forward to another conversation around your next book when it does come out. I don't know if anybody's got any questions here. I mean, Rob's done such a good job explaining it. I think he often leaves us with very few questions to ask because it's so apparent and clear. Scott, Sarah, anyone want to raise anything, observations, experiences, thoughts?
I just want to thank you. It was just so inspiring. Yeah, I'm going to leave it at that just for time's sake, but I just appreciate it, Robert. It was really inspiring.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah.
And Sarah and Maddie and Michelle, Sarah's the mother that birthed this group, the power of our story of which we are a part. Without her, we certainly would not exist. We'd be goalless, aimless, and staggering around in the fires of uncertainty. So she drives us forward in the most beautiful way, and we love her. But Rob, I think, Scott, do you want to final thoughts?
Sure.
A good Marine close off?
Absolutely. I second everything you just said. We'll start with that. And certainly with what Sarah has put together here. We're very blessed for that. And something you said in the beginning, Robert, you talked about, you could have put a book together that would probably be very exciting and very intriguing about your exploits, in the SAS, with the regiment and all the things that you did that would probably put folks on the edge of their seat, and some of the things that you would tell them that would just be, oh my God, that's crazy or that's horrible or whatever. But I think what you've done here in this book is you're leaving a legacy, right? You're leaving a map to where the other story would have been very entertaining and certainly would absolutely sell. But this is so much more meaningful because this is something that can stay with folks well after you're gone, right? This is a very big legacy thing, I feel. And you've been through your upbringing and your disposition, your perspective is so incredible because you're the person that's not going to look at the glass as being half empty, right? You're looking at it the other way. And I made a note here when I was looking through the book, reading through, and you say that, but as life has taught me, every ending holds the seed of a beginning. So when you referenced seeing the imaging that you were lit up like a tree, most folks would have, gone inward, but you chose to see this as, okay, I might not know exactly what I need to do, but I need to go forward. I need to go this way, instead of thinking, okay, man, it's going to come to an end and, I don't have much time. I mean, that may have come to your mind at some point because we always deal with challenges, right? But uh, the way you've done this absolutely is a game changer for folks that might struggle with things like this. And I think another thing to think about here when you go through the list is priorities, right? We all have to make choices, certainly, but what are our priorities in lives? That looks to the goal piece too, right? So with choices and priority or in goals, what are the priorities? What are the things that are important in our lives that will help shape these things too? I was thinking about that as you were talking. I was like, wow, this is good stuff. Very happy that you came back with us today because there's some things that my wife's probably, she's hearing this and she's probably thinking, okay, oh, that's a lot of good stuff. When are you going to start doing some of that? So I'm at a disadvantage now. But in all seriousness, thanks, Robert, and we are absolutely looking forward to a part 3 here. Whenever that is, you are always welcome to come share your wisdom with us for sure.
Yeah, thanks very much for your comments, Scott. Yeah, it's a universal thing, really. That and I would say to all on the call, if you've got young people around you or near you, your own family or other or close people, tell them about this stuff early. These principles. I call myself a mature age teenager, by the way, so I'm still learning. Every day is a school day for me, every day. But if you've got young people, tell them about these principles and guide them through it if you need to, because if they can get it in their teen years, and they will get it if they're guided well, especially, then they're going to be superb adults by the time they're in their 20s. And man, what a legacy as a parent or a friend or an uncle or an auntie you can do for your young people around you. And it's proven now and so on. And, this is not a new idea. They've been writing about this for a couple of millennia. It's just that my lazy kayak trip, I've thought up a couple of principles here and there and put it into action. So thanks very much for everyone for their attention. And you can get in touch with me through my website, robertkilsby.com, anytime, and drop us a line, ask questions, and I'll be always delighted to people who want to go forward and be like me, a perennial student.
Those are fantastic closing words. You couldn't have done that any better. Barry, do you have anything you want to leave us with?
No, just to say thanks to everybody. Michelle, good to see you on today. Maddie, hope we bump into each other one of these days. Rob, I'll give you a call this weekend, but just to thank everybody for being here. Rob, for sharing your wisdom. It's good wisdom, practical wisdom, and it's a wisdom we need to encapsulate in our lives till the day we die. So thank you.
Absolutely. And if folks, have a little bit of time after we're done with the recording, once we end, if you want to hang out, you've got some questions, we can do that offline. So with that, I want to thank everybody for being here. For the folks that see this in the recorded version, thank you for staying this long. This is a very good session, and make sure you get Robert's book. So with that, everyone have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here next month for another edition of Veterans in Conversation. Thank you.